Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar organized by the International Islamic University of Malaysia and the UNESCO Chair in Future Studies, Anticipating Wellbeing and Sustainability. We are indeed privileged to have with us 5 panelists, and I shall introduce them in a few minutes. I would just like to say and reiterate that the topic of our discussion today is Futures Studies and Humanities in Medical Education. Some could say it's very broad, it's vague. So please allow me to elaborate a little bit the context and what actually drove us to organize this webinar. It is, in my opinion, timely and relevant because COVID-19, which was first identified in December 2019, has not left us alone since. It has now blown into a pandemic. It has devastated around 4.6 million lives worldwide, and we are still counting. The figure keeps increasing. It has also tragically destroyed 225 million jobs globally. The pandemic has exposed sharp economic and social inequalities, has also exposed our weaknesses, our weak healthcare systems, and our lack of ability to rush in an emergency. And it has also brutally widened the already existing gaps with the most vulnerable in our society, the old, children, women. Our doctors and nurses were at the front line from day one, battling with this disease. They were attending to the sick, and members of the medical fraternity in every country cannot but be our heroes, and they still are. Because of the nature of this disease, the world has become increasingly digitalized. The rate has just gone up, and it's inevitable. Hence today, it has become urgent, and so urgent that human beings need to find ways to engage in economic activities or otherwise virtually, using the internet, using online platform. And Zoom has always been there, for instance, but now everyone knows Zoom more than they knew Zoom before. Microsoft Teams, Google Meet. As much as possible, virtual activities need to replace the face-to-face ones. And it's sad that the face-to-face experience that we all treasure has taken a terrible beating. So where has that left us? I personally have written a few articles on futures literacy and have contributed to the local press. I'm grateful for that opportunity. I'm grateful that they published my little humble work. But after seeing what has happened, I'm a strong advocate of future studies. And I will say today that industries or organizations that were forward-thinking the past 10 years or even 5 years, and they were actively involved in digital onboarding because their leaders thought that was necessary, these organizations suffered somewhat less when COVID suddenly appeared. Those who hardly had online presence, either because they didn't see it as necessary, they sat on it, they waited, or simply because the nature of their business could not accommodate an online presence. For example, event organizers, conference organizers, they cannot have an online presence. These businesses or these organizations were almost put out of business very quickly. They could not survive. So today we need to discuss how can our medical schools, our medical curriculum, our teaching styles, our assessment methods, how are all of these things that I've mentioned going to prepare our institutions to face this ongoing battle with COVID. The world has just changed. And are we able to cope? Not just cope. It's sad that we just have to cope, but we need to be able to excel in this new norm. So keeping what I said in mind, the panelists this morning would and should highlight what is critical and urgent given the current state of affairs. Our respected panelists will each have 5 minutes to present, after which I shall pose a few questions to them. This will be a candid discussion. We shall keep formalities to the bare minimum. If listeners have questions, please feel free to type your questions in the chat function, or I will invite you to even post them directly to the panelists at the end of the session. I will begin with the much respected Professor Dato Dr. Ahmad Murad Merican. He is a professor at the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization, International Islamic University in Malaysia, known as ISTAC, and heads the Institute's unit of Malay Islamicization. He's currently the chair, the Ibn Khaldun chair also. He is visiting professor with the Center for Policy Research International Studies, USM, and senior fellow at the Southeast Asia Research Center and Hub at the Del University, Manila, the Philippines. Professor Murad was the Honorary President Resident Fellow with Pradana Leadership Foundation. He has a PhD in the History and Philosophy of Science, having earlier studied political science, journalism, and mass communication. He has authored and edited 16 books on the areas of the history of social science, social and intellectual history, journalism and media studies, and colonialism and Malay society. Dr. Murad, Prof. Murad, the floor is yours. I should say the screen. Are you able to unmute? Yes, you are.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Zarina. Assalamualaikum. Good morning and welcome to all the panelists to the session. One correction, I'm not the holder of the Ibn Khaldun chair. All right. This webinar is a continuation of a number of earlier webinars that we had, Zarina had with a few of us in a capacity as head of future studies at the rector's office at IIUM. And we were deliberating on a number of things on the idea what future studies is and what can do to the university. And I was dabbling on how future studies can be offered in the existing curricula of several disciplines. So we had one webinar on the components or the theme of future studies. And future studies is not a new theme. It is an old theme. It is an old idea. It has been around for about 50, 60 or 70 years, since the 1950s. So, but we're trying to renew it in Malaysia. And the other one is humanities. These are two different themes, two different domains. These are also not new. What we were thinking of where future studies is concerned is to create the consciousness and interest on future studies with regard to how it can be offered in several ways to several schools or fraternities in the training and education of, say, engineers or physicians. The second webinar that we had was to look into the possibility of getting future studies to be introduced into the journalism school. Essentially, future studies was a branch of the US Air Force, social science branch of the US Air Force. It is social science. It was used by the RAND Corporation in the early 50s in light of the Cold War. It has several approaches, perspectives, and methodologies. Essentially, it uses a Delphi method. It uses alternative futures, alternative scenarios, forward thinking, looking into how we may choose our future. And this was the main deliberation among the US elites and US policymakers in the early 50s. And it went on to the 60s and 70s. It did not become a discipline. It was not popularly offered in the universities, but some universities in the world now have future studies at mainly at the postgraduate level in Taiwan and Hawaii and several US universities. And we remember in the 70s, a number of pop futurists appeared. Alvin Toffler, for example. Books like Future Shock and a few others. And also the Club of Rome was part of the deliberation of future studies to look into the possibility of catastrophe in the modern world. And early on, they were looking at the catastrophe resulting from the war, from the nuclear warfare. So it was much of a concern in America with regard to creating a better world, a prosperous world to overcome these problems. So they were looking at those things. And future studies was used in Malaysia, especially in the 90s, by the public authorities. It has been used in the planning for Vision 2020 Malaysia, and also in one or two other agencies set up by the government in the 1990s. So there was a certain consciousness with regard to it in terms of its application. And what we are now is part of that deliberation, although it may not come, it may not be deliberated or studied or used under the name of future studies. So we thought that the theme in several ways can be offered to the medical school. As a result of the pandemic of the last 2 years, it occurred to us that their doctors or physicians could be exposed to public policy in a more enhanced way in terms of forecasting diseases and so on, looking at looking at the future in terms of health planning, and also looking at the medical curriculum, because now, because of the pandemic, medical students cannot do clinical. They cannot go to hospitals. So again, the pedagogy with regard to such a scenario, that is one where future studies is concerned. The other is the humanities, also not a new subject. The humanities has been part of university education. We cannot talk about university education without the humanities. And when we talk about the humanities, we generally mean music, art, history, literature, and this would be powerful offerings, not only to the arts faculty and the social sciences, but also to the sciences, engineering, and medicine. I was joking with some people during my daughter's last 2 months in medical school, that early on that she should take up music or art if there's an offering in her medical school. But we thought that this offering has been around. It has been deliberated by several areas. For example, actual science in the 60s, 70s in America, the regulatory body has introduced literature for training, education of actual scientists. So where doctors are concerned, I have not seen this. Perhaps I'm wrong, but I've not seen this in Malaysia. It is there in the American system, because in America, medical education is seen to be a postgraduate education, and those who would want to be in the medical school have to take a first degree, and their first degree would generally be under the liberal arts. It's a liberal arts education. I was there in the liberal arts school in the US, and I was in the same classes as prospective medical students. So again, they take art, they take literature, and so on. So again, here it would be good to think of offering medical students subjects like music, art, or literature in terms of their visual or their oral, and their empathy with society. I know of one or two medical schools. I met some professors in Malaysia where they told me that they have sociology, and where they look into the history of diseases. And this is one development which has been around in one medical school in Malaysia. So I thought that we can discuss this, we can deliberate it, and also it's perhaps would be quite quite significant with regard to the medical kuliah in the International Islamic University. These dimensions, apart from what we understand as Islamic approach, perhaps other dimensions to be introduced and to be imbued to the future physician in this country. Yeah, Zarina.
Thank you, Prof. Murad. Thank you for that great opening, because it sets the tone and it gives a background of the importance of future studies as a, as an accompanying discipline, if you like, for the other departments and kulliyahs and IUM. They call departments kulliyahs. I would now like to give a slight brief background about Dr. Changda, Dr. Changda Wan. He's asked me to call him Changda. He's the director at the National Higher Education Research Institute, Universiti Sains Malaysia. He was trained as an economist before venturing into higher education. His main interest is higher education policy, and he has been involved in a number of research and consultancy projects relating issues of governance and management in higher education, access and equity, doctoral education, the academic profession and internationalization of higher education, with a particular focus on developing countries. Currently, he is leading a research project looking at the relevance and currency of university curriculum. Changda is an EXCO member of the Malaysian Society for Higher Education Policy and Research Development, Pendapat, and member of the Global Young Academy. Dr. Changda, floor is yours. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Thank you, Madam Zarina. First of all, thank you for this opportunity to be speaking at this very interesting topic about future studies, humanities in medical education. Let me make a few disclaimers. I'm not from the medical fraternity, neither am I trained anywhere near to it. But I'll bring to this discussion two instances. One is from my personal experience while doing my PhD in the UK, where I have the good opportunity to work with a doctor in developing communication modules in the medical program in the UK university that I was with doing my PhD. So that was a very enlightening experience for me, and has given me insights into understanding a little bit of what medical students in the UK has gone through. And this was about 10 years ago when I was there. And what happened was really I was invited, I was sort of selected to be a patient in this communication module, and every medical students in that university, at the third year medical student of a 6 years program, the third year students will have a series of communication modules that they have to take. And the one that I was involved in developing and subsequently has to be the patient that I will eventually meet every medical student in that cohort is on cultural communication. So, and there are other modules such as breaking the bad news, such as communication, interviewing with patients. So these are communication modules that is designed specifically for medical students. And the interesting part is how that whole module is actually designed around my experience as a patient. So I have to be that patient seeing every medical students on a weekly basis. They will come to me, spend about 5-10 minutes as a group, and treat me as a patient, and then I will bring to them some a scenario, a couple of different scenarios, mainly to create that awareness of cultural sensitivity in terms of communication and in terms of their diagnostics and things like that. So that was the personal experience that I had closest to what medical education is. And that was, I personally find that to be very enlightening, because it reflects that the medical doctors or the medical students who is going through this tends to force them to think out of their cultural context. For example, some of the Asian values that we have, some of the our myth and misunderstanding, or some of our, for example, one of the scenario that we did was, I'm a strong believer of a traditional medicine, and I'm not open to the Western medical kind of practice. And how should the doctors then help me to untangle or unpack some of the cultural assumptions that I have, and how that leads to a more proper diagnostic of their thinking. And the second experience that I bring to this discussion is really from my own work, looking at changes and how current is our university curriculum. I have not looked at medical education specifically, but I've looked at some other discipline in the sciences, in engineering, as well as in social sciences, and also to identify what are the challenges and the barriers to of what is basically stopping, or what is hindering university education to the curriculum itself, in terms of what we teach, how we teach, evolve according to our times. Because if you look at some of the curriculum, not only that the content is very outdated, you still have reading lists 20, 30 years ago given to students of this generation. Before the pandemic, majority of how that education is taking place in the classroom is basically still chalk and talk, of having someone standing in front there, delivering a lecture kind of education. And so what is stopping the universities and the academics from progressing with times, and also what would be the structural barriers? So these are some of the work that I was doing prior. At this moment, it's still ongoing, but the pandemic, it was very interesting, where we actually get to see what's the difference between pandemic coming in and how that part of the study was done during this pandemic. So it has also opens up some avenues and some important questions for us as we begin to change because of this pandemic. How much of that change is going to be that we are going to carry with us in a post-pandemic situation, as well as how can we navigate within that environment and that structure that has already been put in place in our higher education system. For example, requirement of NQA and things like that. And how does academics actually think out of the box in terms of delivering or imparting the education that we should be imparting in terms of the curriculum. So these are some of the pertinent questions that the project that myself and my colleagues are working on at the moment. And also perhaps how do we incorporate and how do we take into account the voices of students, of academics? How do we empower academics as teacher in their own classroom, and to give them the trust that they are the most eligible expert who knows their student and what sort of content and knowledge and approach to be given, rather than taking a very paternalistic top-down to say everyone must teach in this way, in a very structured form. So where do we find that balance? These are some of the questions that we were grappling with in our study. So I think I'll stop there for now.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I'll just what sticks to my mind immediately is like the pandemic has become like a catalyst, yeah, to hopefully spearhead some changes, and then, you know, to what extent will it actually spill over into reality? Well, later, more of that later. Thank you, Dr. Changda. That was very insightful. I would now like to introduce Associate Professor Dr. Nora Madzin. She is currently attached to the Kulliyyah, or the Department of Medicine. She's part of a School of Medicine in IIUM Kuantan. So in Kuantan's a beautiful place, the beaches and everything. She has with her Master of Medicine, Psychiatry, and clinical specialist from the University Kebangsaan Malaysia, and also a postgraduate diploma in applied psychology from the University of Liverpool, and she graduated with her Doctor of Medicine, bachelor's from University Kebangsaan Malaysia also. And she is she's very experienced in this area of higher education in the field of medicine. She's mastered quality management, healthcare, and she's very involved, and she knows intimately, what's happened to the education system in the medical school of IIUM post-pandemic. And without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Nora Madzin to speak to us. Please, Dr. Nora, the floor is yours. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, thank you very much for arranging this important and timely webinar for to discuss on the future medical education. And I am interested and much pleased with Dr. Chandra just now when he mentioned about how the graduates in terms of the embedded with the cultural, the communication, and what sort of doctors that we are going to produce to make them as a human. I think that's the gist that I can get. Also, I'm gonna talk a bit on actually that there are several future studies in terms of in our medical education. We have discussed about what sort of medical education in the future that we should be imparted. I mean, what sort of graduate, and we can't forget that the humanistic, the humanism must be there, despite of we are busy with the fourth IR, education 4.0, when we are in the era of artificial intelligence. So when we are preparing for this, then comes the pandemic, COVID-19, and it's just catalyzed some of the things. For instance, that I would like to cite what we have our Professor Harden. Professor Harden is the father of the medical education. He is an endocrinologist, a previous dean of Dundies, and he wrote lots of books, and he brings some other new things in the medical education. So in 2018, he spoke about what are the future medical education that we want. What sort of the graduates that we want, what sort of the doctors that we want. And one thing that he mentioned is out of the 10 future medical education, one of that is of so many things is integrating the technology, plus the graduates that we produce, the doctors must be the person who wants to serve their own community. So the changes from so-called, he mentioned about from ivory tower to the real world. So the students need to be equipped with knowledge, skills, and must be also accountable. The university or this medical school should be accountable if anything happens, not just from the start they become the housemanship, and then we forget about the medical education. There will be a movement that the medical school itself must be accountable for what happened to the future doctors when they work. we have not come into that yet, I guess. But there's the cases in Western, they have about nurses, yeah. So that is the real things that we must do. So the school probably need to allow the student to be a partner, not just a client. So they are our partner. And when the pandemic comes, we know that we are worried, how are we going to deliver and how we want to make our students become, because they probably, although we do have some physical classes, but when the time is very serious, lots of cases, we have to close, then they should be on online only. And all the skills, maybe through videos, the teachers is in the OT room, the students in one place, they can't in because of safety reason as well. So this is where the technology also, we started to realize that we should be rely on the technology, but the technology that we want must be human as well. So this was humanizing technology, I think, the words there. And what happened during pandemic also, now we are worried, are we prepared for the post-pandemic? I'm not sure, because we are going to go to endemic after this. So the other key future medical student or the doctors that we want is students, apart from not a client, but is a partner. Student must develop their own personality. When they are given a chance, when they are in final year, probably they can work as a junior doctors who take charge in the treatment. So the 10 key future studies in medical education here is actually some of that we are doing now. We have done it, not but there are still lots of things to be done. Another area that I would like to touch here is about how to humanize. How do you want to be human? Because of the doctors probably very nowadays the traditional teaching, we separate the basic teaching, basic sciences from the clinical, from the practical. So it should be starting from the beginning. The student can learn on job. They can learn the theory, the everything, the integration as early as from year 1 until year 5. So this is the real things. So they can learn more, they can see more. It is not just move from, it is not just we separate in isolation. This is what is happening now. We just add on some problem-based learning in the year 1, but in the reality, the student should be taught to do self-directed learning rather than directed self-learning. We don't have a teacher to direct them, but the self-directed. So we guide them. And having said to teach to get that, so the teacher here is the really big component. The teacher must be valued in certain ways. It's not undervalued. The teacher must be rewarded in appropriately. And with the pandemic after this, we realized that some of the things can be done virtually, but we still need to see and touch and feel the patient. And to make them human, I would like to also think about the Professor Dato Murad just now and Prof Chandra, that we have to put some element of not just medical knowledge, because it's not fair, it's not appropriate just to treat the patient based on medical knowledge, because there's other things. I'll give you an example. If let's say a person come for acute gastroenteritis, so it's probably infection, but look at what are the contributing factors. Look at the social living situation, where do they live, and to understand this, the doctors must be human, not just, okay, you are having a gastroenteritis, the physician will give them medication. And then you go back and comes again. So the other doctors thought, oh, this is could be because you don't get enough proper food, this and that. So whereas we have to teach our graduates to be human that can see each of the angle. So the last thing that probably in the first round, I think I would like to also, the future studies must allow the students to have a economy, to have the knowledge in economy, engineering, and the economy, engineering, economy, because they have to create job. They have to be comfortable to open their own clinic, start their business. Otherwise, because the pandemic will come. I mean, after this, we don't know what will happen. So we need to survive so they can do their marketing, and the engineering here is they must well versed with the technology to help them, and also apart from the knowledge. And one of the paper that I read, very nice, they put as insightology in the medical student. I think maybe Prof Murad can, it's more philosophical and social, I think, but the insightology, which is very interesting for me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nora. Thank you for that. I will now introduce our fourth panelist, and she is Dr. Norhayati Nordin. She's currently hospital director and senior consultant, child adolescent psychiatrist at the hospital Bahagia Ulu Kinta in Tanjung Rambutan. Okay, her qualifications, she's amazing. Bachelor's of Medical Science in University from UKM, a Doctor of Medicine also from UKM, a Master's in Medicine, Psychiatry in UKM, and her specialty in training is Victorian Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, which she received from the University of Melbourne, Monash, Australia. She's also the member of NSR's Specialty Subcommittee of Psychiatry, co-joint board for postgraduate in psychiatry, specialty training, postgraduate psychiatry at KKM, and training also. She's also a lecturer. I also noticed that she's been invited all over Malaysia, even some radio talk shows, currently speaking on mental health and how Malaysians are currently coping with the current pandemic. As you know, the suicide rates have gone up. There are some people who are in complete despair. This is a humanitarian crisis, and I feel blessed that we've got two psychiatrists actually with us, and she's the second one. Dr. Norhayati, I'm so sorry you had problems with your laptop, but you look very nice. We can see you very clearly. I like your white coat, and the floor is yours, Dr. Yati. Please, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Thank you. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Chair Madam, for your kind introduction. So it's a very good and interesting morning that this is the only time that I can have an opportunity to have some intellectual discussion with different professions. Okay, sorry, because we clinicians, we are always with our patients. So before we proceed with the medical future research and humanity in medical education, I think let us refresh back what is medical education and what is medicine actually. Okay, so for those people, even me, it's very interesting that when you have been working for more than 30 years, you have gone through being a medical student, a trainee, and a consultant, and now you're doing curriculum for them. I think I have gone through the whole process and see what are the things that need to change. Okay, so when somebody wants to be a doctor, is that usually they will say that I'm caring for my patient. I want to care for my patient, but caring for your patient is when the medical curriculum and education comes in, because we want to produce good doctors, what is attributing the making a good doctors. So let us go back into what is medicine. Medicine is basically science. Medicine is science, but we do evidence-based medicine when we have data and numbers. It's very inhumane. It's numbers, it's illness, it's etiology. But when we doctors, we always make decisions. When we make decision, we call it clinical decision. Let's say if a person has an illness, to make a decision, what are the best treatment that I want to give to my patient, will incorporate the arts and the humanities. Because medicine, pure medicine, is only science. Medicine is a comprehensive of both science and arts. So when we are producing a curriculum syllabus to our medical students, we have to look into both aspects. The scientific aspect, where how we understand the illness, how are the scientific method to get information and all that. But on the other side of arts and humanity, it's about the ethics, the adaptability for a person to be able to join the evidence and make a clinical judgment. So let's say if somebody who are not comfortable with a certain treatment, then we have to reflect back at what are their background, what are the culture that as a professional, we cannot use our own judgment, our own experience. That is when we need to incorporate what Prof. Murad was saying earlier, to how we want to incorporate other people's culture is by food, music, movies. When we do have all those things, then we can understand. Maybe I was lucky in the sense that when during my primary school, at school, I learned, I even can hit little of Hokkien. I can use a little bit of Tamil because we mingle around with our friends in the primary school. But of course, the language we use is more of teasing the other classmates and all that. But when you are practicing, you understand. You say, I cannot use my personal experience, my personal belief to impart the knowledge to my patient. I have to be able to adjust, adapt. And with this coming COVID-19, this pandemic, you see, things are moving very fast. And we have to catch up with all the movement. Even in medicine, you see, in medicine, we have the technology, the nanotechnology, 3D, robotic, and this is not what I was taught when I was in the 90s. Nothing of that. Everything you only use your ears, your hands, and your eyes. But now this technology, that is on the medical aspect of it. But on the aspect of art, humanities, people are interacting, communication and all that, they are interacting in a different way now. It's not face-to-face, it's online, it's Facebook, it's, and when we have all this social media that we are interacting, one thing as a psychiatrist, as a child psychiatrist, one thing that I'm very worried about is that we cannot tolerate time. We need to do things very fast. We cannot tolerate criticism because why? With the new social media, when you don't like something that somebody posts, you can just delete and block the person. But in real life, you have to learn, you have to be resilient, face the person in front of you. But you see, this is what doctors are all about. And with our client now who are able to access knowledge at the fingertips, our doctors has been in advance compared to our patients in empowering them with their needs. Okay, so when we are, because I think we are very lucky in the sense that in Malaysia, even this whole week, we are having training of the trainers, how to assess, how to reflect back to our trainees. How, because MMC has just launched a new curriculum for the master's program, for the specialty program. So we are looking into it again. How can we train new specialists, new subspecialists with the different perspective, the different angle compared to in the early 2000 or in the 90s. Okay, so when we you misunderstand, as things are moving faster, we're always looking into how best can we help these children, these students. But please do not forget the trainers too need new education, because we have a lot of head of department who can't even use their website, they can't even use their webinar, they always have to use the technical person to help them out. Which when we doctors, we never need technical assistance to use the stethoscope. But now, when you see we have glitches, you know, the internet line is not well. When we are planning a curriculum, do not forget the trainers too. Because all of us are in the same page. You see, we are even going, if you are running a 100-meter sprint, the trainers are in the same page as the students. Everything is new to all of us. There will be no lecturers or trainers be saying, no, I know more than you know. Everybody now is at square one. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to look into all angles. The trainers, the trainees, the students, even most probably even the policymakers, that even they have to learn new things now. Okay, because the way we work, the way we think is already different. So it's not we thought it was some just 20, 30 years, but the changes is too fast. Okay, I think this is something that I want, maybe we can discuss further so that we can come to a general decision that, you know, how we want to proceed educating our, doing our medical education properly for the future. I think because we have also think about what would the future runs, and when we are planning for this kind of curriculum system, we cannot go by the small issues. We have to go by the principle. Try to create something that is still valid in 20 years' time. The principle of it, not the everyday kind of thing that we need to do. If it's a principle that can last a long time, and look into the aspect of how people learn. When we were younger, we have one curriculum for primary school, secondary school. But that is when now, as a child psychiatrist, I realized that a lot of students have different ways of learning. Not studying, it's different way how people learn. Some people are very wordy. Some likes to see images, pictures. Some learn by movements, because we have 5 senses that we can use to learn. So that's why now we can see that, and I'm very grateful to the Kementerian Pendidikan, they have khas pendidikan khas, so that we can cater for children who have a different skills of how to learn. Not just reading and writing and exams and all that. So I think this is something that we have to look into, that because our children now are exposed to different knowledge worldwide, globalization, and some children learns to different methods. So I think for the curriculum, the educationists, I think you have to look into how people study, how people learn. So I think similarly, we look into the phone. You see, iPhone, they change the model every year, but they don't change everything. But one principal thing they will change. So I think the curriculum have to be reviewed regularly as fast as how iPhone changed the model. If you want to review every 5 years, then we'll be left behind, like some other telcos. Okay, with that, I'll get it back to the pengerusi. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yati. That was really refreshing. I like the metaphor that you used. We need to keep up with the iPhones of the world. That's the kind of yardstick that we need to use and remember, you know, before I forget, because Dr. Khor's coming up next. Basically, how people learn today, how will they learn tomorrow? So maybe we should start planning our today by looking at tomorrow. We look at the future, and then from the point of the future, we need to work backwards. I can't think of any other way. And we maybe all be back to square one. You know, perhaps our students know our platforms better than instructors and teachers do, but I'd like to still say and reiterate that our teachers are the people with the knowledge. They are supposed to be the ones with the knowledge, but without understanding the current platforms, without trying to stay ahead of the game, the curve, being relevant, the students are not going to listen. Yeah, the students are not going to listen. So anyway, I'm going to just stop here very quickly and now introduce our fifth and final panelist, Dr. Khor Swee Kheng. I hope my voice is clear because someone texted that my voice is faint. Dr. Khor Swee Kheng is a Malaysian physician with international experience in the public, private, non-profit and think tank sectors. Currently, he specializes in health systems and policies and global health, holding fellowships at Chatham House, the United Nations University and ISIS Malaysia. Previously, he held progressively senior practitioner roles in clinical medicine, refugee and disaster relief, clinical research, and pharma anti-corruption. In these roles, Dr. Khor was based in Malaysia, Singapore, Dubai, Shanghai, and Paris, covering over 90 countries across Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. He holds postgraduate degrees in internal medicine, Royal College of Physicians, public health from UC Berkeley, public policy from Oxford, and has published over 150 articles in international media, think tanks, and academic journals, including The Lancet, Project Syndicate, Council on Foreign Relations, and Foreign Affairs. Dr. Khor, we can't wait to hear from you. The floor is yours. I'm going to unmute you right now.
Thank you, Zarina. Before I begin, may I ask, is it 5 minutes or 10 minutes that I have?
You can take up to 10 minutes. I think the speakers have slightly gone beyond and I did not want to cut them off. So
thank you. Let me try for 5 to 7 minutes and I have a stopwatch and I'll try to keep the time. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and thank you very much for having me. I'm very interested. Thank you. I'm very interested in everything my fellow panelists that went before me had to say. Professor Ahmad, Murad, Merican, Dr. Wan, Dr. Norhayati, as well as the other speaker, Dr. Nora, sorry for that. What they basically did was to concentrate on future studies and humanities as a way to make the doctor more complete. That a doctor is not just a scientific vessel, but rather an agent of society, agent of science in the society that he or she lives in to communicate better, persuade better, motivate better, encourage better, so that we'll be able to have better health outcomes for everyone. And I reiterate all that and I'm very strongly in support. What I'd like to do, Zarina and my fellow panelists, is to maybe take the conversation in 3 separate ways. The first way is to talk about futures thinking, future studies, secondly, humanities, and thirdly, social sciences and its direct relation to medicine and health. Secondly, I would like to talk about not so much medical education in medical school for medical students aged 20 to 25, but lifelong medical and continuous professional development. And finally, its direct impact on policymakers and health policy making in Malaysia and also around the world. Those are the 3 areas that I will consider in my comments for the next 5 minutes or so. Firstly is to say that future studies, if history looks at the past, then future studies looks into the future. And this is very relevant for doctors and medical professionals, especially as they make policies for the future. Humanities are, and I'm not a specialist over here, so allow me to give a very simple definition of the humanities, studies human culture, basically. Things like literature, history, art, music, philosophy. There are the social sciences, which study the science of societies, law, and how individuals interact with each other. I'd like to bring maybe 5 areas from humanities and social sciences and futures thinking that I think is highly relevant to a doctor or any medical professional or health professional, not just a doctor, because pharmacists, nurses, paramedics, and allied health professionals are exceedingly important in any healthcare ecosystem. So maybe public administration, because it's not enough that we know science, we must know how administration of organizations work. Government, private sector, NGOs, doesn't matter. We need to know how to administer them, because at some point you stop being a doctor and you become, for example, Dr. Yati and Dr. Nora, heads of departments, in the case of Dr. Wan, a director of a research institution, and Prof. Ahmad Merican, the polymath for us, that he does many things. So we stop being a narrow professional and a much larger administrator. Secondly, we need to know economics. Thirdly, law. Fourthly, political sciences. And fifthly, maybe philosophy. That's humanities to me, and also future studies. And that's how it's directly relevant to me, becoming a medical professional or a health professional. Let me move on, secondly, Zarina, to my second point, which is that the topic of today's conversation is about medical students, and I think that's great. However, once we stop medical school and we enter the real world, our education does not stop. Therefore, we may need to consider adding humanities, social sciences, future studies into master's training programs. Also, secondly, before a doctor becomes a head of department or head of service or head of hospital or any senior position that is non-clinical, maybe we need to send them for, well, let's call it a mini module in political science, a mini module in economics, a mini module in public administration, so that a clinician who is a specialist in any discipline, medicine or surgery, will know how is it to manage a particular institution without, well, being totally, I won't say exposed, but to have all the necessary skill sets needed to manage a large organization. What I mean to say is, we can't just focus on humanities education only for medical school, but for lifelong continuous professional development, maybe give CPD points or continuous professional development points to doctors if they take even a non-clinical, non-medical subject, like public policy or health policy. And certainly maybe to consider adding these modules before somebody becomes a hospital director. That's the second bucket of what I would like to say. Finally, is to talk about the very long-term impact on humanities, future studies, as well as social sciences. Education today, there is an impact 10, 20, 30 years into the future. If you change medical education today, the impact, change the curriculum, add a module and so on, the impact will only be felt 5 years after the person graduates, or rather, you set the policy today, person comes into medical school in year 1, 5 years later you see an effect, and 5 years after that there'll be more impact because there'll be a larger critical mass of people who are practicing the new skills that they are studying. And that mindset needs to start today, because our health policy making infrastructure in Malaysia perhaps is not adequate and it's not future proof. And I offer two neutral thoughts. The first one, the health policy making infrastructure in Malaysia is very dominated, or rather mostly predominantly dominated by doctors. Doctors are great. I'm a doctor myself, love doctors. However, doctors have a very clinical way of seeing the world. Healthcare, more hospitals, more vaccines, more technology, more surgeries, more money into healthcare systems will save Malaysia. But this pandemic tells us that health is social and health is a political choice. So science alone is 50% of the way. The remaining 50% would be political choices, understanding of economics, understanding of the humanities, future studies, and social sciences. This is not to reduce the role of doctors, but to increase the role of social sciences, humanities, and future studies in health policy making. If society considers doctors to be in higher regard for any reason, good or bad, fair or unfair, then I think doctors need to be equipped with the skills to make health policies for Malaysia and the rest of the world without being overly focused on the science or the evidence, sorry, not evidence, but the science aspects of it. The social aspects of medicine are equally important, and humanities, future studies, and social sciences can get us there. Zarina, I've given 3 thoughts. The first one is to say that the branches of humanities and social sciences that I deeply appreciate are administration, economics, law, political science, and philosophy. Secondly, we must have lifelong study of these additional non-clinical, non-science subjects, because it will then enrich us and we cannot just stop at age 25. Thirdly and finally, what we do today echoes for the next 10 to 20 years. And certainly the policy-making apparatus of Malaysia needs to upgrade themselves by adding social sciences and humanities. I'm going to pause here at 7.5 minutes and return the rest of the minutes to you, Zarina. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you for that so precise, not just in content, but also in timekeeping. Congratulations. But there's so much that you've raised, actually, and it was very nice how you summarized it very neatly by explaining what humanities are and what it encompasses, and then social sciences and which subjects, you know, you would recommend the non-science and non-clinical subjects that should be introduced to create more balanced doctors, if you like, more balanced medical personnel, and to try and increase the quality of our medical fraternity so that we can avoid tunnel vision, right? Anyway, I am now going to ask Professor Murad to probably, I think it's perfect that Professor Murad will be taking up or will be elaborating further, digging deeper into points raised by Dr. Khor. Prof. Murad, I recall that, you know, in our earlier discussions, you were saying that medicine is an, did you use the word imprecise science? And you were talking about physicians, actually. You kept emphasizing that we should be talking about physicians, and physicians with values, physicians with a heart. You know, we need to remember the importance of humanity and civilization, and keep in mind, how do we keep the fundamentals of the human being still intact at the end of how many years of medical school? How do we incorporate Sejahtera, if you like? Can you respond to this, to my question? And not just I think we're tackling it from the point of curriculum. It's but I want you to be mindful of the current virtual world that we live in now, where our students are going to be learning this new curriculum more often than not virtually, or maybe it'll be a hybrid form. And also I'd like you to touch upon not just what ought to be, but even if it was perfect on paper, Prof. Murad, and given your several years as an academician, as a practitioner, do you think that there will be huge challenges in trying to implement the kind of, you know, changes that we want to see in Malaysia? The floor is yours. Let me unmute you. Yes, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Zarina. That's a difficult complex of questions to respond. But first of all, I would suggest that the various parties, medical schools and the Malaysian Medical Council will bring on board Dr. Khor's suggestions on the various dimensions to be included in the medical education. The regulatory body would have to be cognizant of our discussion. In fact, our discussion here is a dialogue, a continuing dialogue among the disciplines. I think this has to be the norm in Malaysia now. You know, where we have continuing dialogues, we interact among disciplines, and we benefit from each other. Yeah, I've said earlier on, medicine is an imprecise science. In fact, there was one book 30 years back about science that precision is a myth. I gathered this also when I was taking a course in genetics for my undergraduate political science degree, and the professor was focusing on cancer, oncology. Right, I was talking about values with regard to university education, with regard to education for the professions. And we look at the various professions, almost all focus on the technicalities, on skills of what that profession has to do. They will focus on the immediate needs or immediate ability of the products of the profession, much to leaving aside forms of values that are critical to understanding the human being, humanity and civilization. For example, in law, you've got many subjects. Then you will have one course on jurisprudence. That's the only course that is near to what we call the humanities. And we don't see these things in engineering or in medicine. But again, it would be good if medicine were to have, for example, some interaction in their modules or in their courses or in whatever way the medical curriculum wants to offer. For instance, the subject of interviewing, how we solicit information, what they call perhaps clerking, how they solicit information from patients. Many professions interview, journalists, lawyers, the people in the enforcement agencies, and doctors. And what is important here, and also I need to mention social scientists, anthropologists, ethnologists, sociologists, they also interview. But what's important here, I think that there's a need to look at interviews from a multidisciplinary perspective and adapt differences in which other professions interview and solicit information. So this is one way in which one can have this empathy with what others do. Another way of looking at it is, into the arts, literature, poetry. I remember about 30 years back, you will remember the emergence of digital companies. And one thing I still hold to this is, you will remember Sun Microsystems. The CEO mentioned this, study technology, engineering, mathematics, but also learn poetry. That was a very powerful statement. Why poetry to technologies? But I thought that poetry should also be an important dimension for the physician. I've met doctors. One doctor many years back said that he is a fan of literature. He reads Tolstoy. Why reading literature, for example? Because when we read literature, fiction, novels, poetry, we internalize the human condition. We internalize the angst of humanity. We internalize values of other people and other cultures. So this is one way which I thought can be imbued in the medical school, in terms of looking at those components that could be embraced in different forms, and especially when we refer to the Kulliyyah of Medicine in this university, the International Islamic University. We're talking about a larger framework that the rector has instituted, that is on sejahtera. Sejahtera, literally in English, is prosperity, and sejahtera is about human values. It's about the innate capacity of what we can call the cult, the heart, not the physical heart, but the heart and the whole dimension of placing ourselves with regard to humanity, looking at ourselves as physicians, for example, or as a member of any profession, as part of nature. This is where I think getting medical students to take art, to read novels as a full-fledged course, and to use that, being intimate with human character, being intimate with human problems and conditions, because literature, for example, can expand and evoke the impossibility of what the possible human being cannot do. And that's why sometimes, or most of the time, fiction can tell more, can illustrate more about the human condition than facts. So storytelling, how and the human narrative, as reflected in some of the perspectives that our panelists have mentioned, is critical to the training of the physician. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah,
thank you very much, Prof. Murad, for that. I'm going to, because we've got, as I said, Friday morning is a busy one for everybody, and I know that some have been sending me messages, chastising me. Why would you organize such an important topic on a Friday morning? And some are actually joining our session in between meetings and they want to leave. So I'm going to invite Dr. Aida from the Kuantan campus to ask a question. Dr. Aida, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, yes, please go ahead and ask your questions directly. I'm changing my format suddenly after being traumatized by that incident where we lost connection. That has never happened to me before, by the way. This is my first time. So Dr. Aida, ask your questions directly to any of the our respected panelists.
Right, thank you so much for bringing the panelists here today. I think this is quite a different outlook into the medical education, although some of it has been thought about, like, because a lot of us have been having exposure overseas, and then we thought about coming and into the medical education and bringing the ideas there, but we never get to do it because of time. I think most of us are inundated with time-related issues. Like we are clinicians, we are also academics, and specifically talking about clinicians in university hospitals lah. And so we are clinicians and academics, and we have research as well. So it's a triple effect compared to doctors who are outside in the ministry. So how do we find that time then? I totally agree with Dr. I'm not really sure, I forgot your name, but the one that says that the HODs, before becoming doctors, before becoming HODs, should go for this certain type of courses. I absolutely agree. I think as administrators, when we become administrators, we need a certain set of skills yang lain sikit that we need, in order to get our objectives out and that there is output. So I totally agree. But how do we find that time, right? Especially when there are departments who do not have enough lecturers, and so they need to think about, okay, you need to do research and then you need to go and learn how to become a HOD. So that, how do we, bridge this? So but time is such macam mana cakap time ni lah, susah lah. You have classes, you have your patients, That's what my query is lah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Aida. Any takers for that question? Anyone can just jump in.
Maybe I can just add in, I've been going through the process. I think for Kementerian Kesihatan Malaysia, I think we cannot teach everybody at one go. Maybe for medical students, we're focusing on the clinical skills first. So when, like Prof. Khor said, as you develop, you know what are the skills you need. So as for Kementerian Kesihatan, we have Institute Pengurusan Kesihatan. So during our clinical posting, our clinical works and all that, if you're interested or if you're pushed down to become administrator, there's a institution in Kementerian Kesihatan where they will coach you how to be managers, how to be leaders, it's an ongoing process, how to be trainers and all that. So I think, I bet even the universities will have more extensive professors in your own university that you can attach to those courses or trainings.
Right. Yes, please. You can unmute yourself, I think, Dr. Changda. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Madam Zarina, for that. And I think I just want to add on to in relations to what Dr. Aida has mentioned about, and an earlier point I think was Dr. Yati who mentioned in the earlier session on the need to emphasize and not forgetting the importance of the trainers or the lecturers or the teachers within medical education. And I think it's extremely important to highlight the fact that the incentive system within the system, especially in the environment of the university, has been a real serious issues to be considered in terms of any changes and improvement to the curriculum, simply because the fact that the incentive system for the university as a whole do not put emphasis on enhancing the quality of teaching and learning. And academics, I mean, we are all economic creatures in a way that we respond to incentive, right? So it is a problem in most universities whereby the incentive system at the moment prioritize things like research and publication over providing or giving serious effort into teaching and the development of your students. And this becomes an even bigger question with lecturers in the medical faculty, because not only that they have to juggle with research and teaching, but also with clinical duties. And that incentive is very important, because as we all know, it's very, very difficult for us in the current system to show what we do in terms of teaching and learning, because that is not easily measured. And especially in an environment where everything is now being measured, teaching is becoming something that is really severely neglected in the universities. And the university is just interested, a lot of universities, not only in Malaysia, but around the world, is that we are interested in the number of students, but we are not really interested in the quality of their experience. And that would is dangerous, because then without giving the right incentive to people, to lecturers, the educators, right, to put in serious effort in thinking about the education process that they are giving to the students. So it's not just merely coming in for 2 hours, give a lecture and get out of the room, right? We are talking about education in a real sense. Is that education is not only just the knowledge, but it's effectively that interaction, that life-changing encounter you have, not only with the knowledge, but also with the people around that process of education. And that needs to be seriously reconsidered as we think about changing or improving the curriculum, because this is a very important element that will make or do. We can have beautiful papers of very nicely outlined courses and things like that, but ultimately what makes education is the people, and the educators is really crucial in that sense. And it's just that I agree very much with what Dr. Khor has said in terms of the 5 elements of social science. May I just also take this opportunity to add, I think a very important and really undervalued component of the social science is the anthropology knowledge. The understanding of cultural is really key, and I would think that is perhaps the 6th that I would add on to what Dr. Khor has mentioned. And I think that is even more important than perhaps political science or administration to medical doctors, because cultural is something you can't run away from. Just that's my point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I was just looking at all the different human science subjects. I mean, I've heard like political science, law, philosophy, now anthropology, and then administration, and then management, and then Professor Murad was talking about music and literature for the longest time. So if I'm going to put it all together, we've got literally about 8 to 9 subjects. I can think of 5 others. I also wonder that, I suppose we need to start somewhere. They need to study something other than, so the sciences, so that they are, you sort of need to balance the right brain and the left, and you want to create this wholesome, balanced human being, right? But at the same time, I'm a believer of implementation, that you can have all these beautiful ideas and it's about implementing it. So I like to highlight, I'm going to throw a question to all of my panelists. Professor Murad stepped out for 15 minutes and he'll be back. In terms of when you look at the custodians of curriculum, who are the stakeholders we want to engage? Who should be in the room? Who do we invite to come to the table to create our curriculum for the medical schools? We don't want it to be dominated by doctors. We need to bring in futurists, political scientists, some businessmen, administrators. So we have different perspective, and the approach is transdisciplinary. It's very holistic. It sounds very perfect. So that's one aspect. And then the other aspect is I'm wondering about lifelong learning. You're graduated, but so as to not be archaic and backdated, outdated, irrelevant, you have to keep learning. But seriously speaking, looking at the current government as it is today, looking at the pandemic, let's be brutally honest, okay? There is COVID right now. The learning and teaching experience, it's going to have to be different. It's going to be online. Dr. Nora keeps saying it. She's saying, now I have to think of my assessment methods. My assessment methods, it's a nightmare, because how am I going to teach my students to teach online and make sure the quality is there? I want them to have to touch. This is how a hardened liver feels like. Imagine teaching online, telling them this is how it feels like. How are they going to understand that? They're not in front of you. You don't have a body in front of you. Are you going to send them dummies? Something that I suggested. We need to think out of the box, send them a dummy. I don't know. How to teach students in Kuantan, Penang, Malacca. It's all over Malaysia. So I'm going to throw that question to you. I would like someone to address my question as in which stakeholders, which key agencies, ministries, individuals we need to be brought in and invited to the table on medical curriculum right now. And how are we going to upgrade and improve the learning and teaching experience in the virtual environment post-pandemic? Two major questions. The floor, anyone, any takers?
Hi, can I just, I don't really know the answer to that actually, but I just wanted to say that the pandemic has its silver linings. For example, we have sessions like problem-based learning. Now, problem-based learning, what I find, because my exposure problem-based learning is the Australian version, which is they really, really want the students to be the ones who are talking and not the facilitators, right? So the Malaysian students are a bit shy, I suppose. So they don't really talk much, or there's no dynamic interaction, right? So they and if they see that the facilitator is there, they really want answers from the facilitators, So what I find that was good about this pandemic is that when I have my PBL classes, I told them, okay, I'm going to give you the first data sheet, okay, and you are going to go into your groups without me, and you're going to discuss this, and you're going to record it. All right, and then you're going to send it back to me. And I find that is good because the facilitator is not there, but they know they have to do the task because they have to send it, and they do interact. And I thought that was that was the good thing I found from this method, the virtual method. And I was able to assess them because it's recorded. So I can just go through again and again and see whether this person is talking or did this person get the right idea. So I just wanted to put that out there. Like, there is something I like about this version of education. But the other questions yang Zarina put up, I don't know the answer.
Thank you, Dr. Ida. Thanks. Dr. Khor, would you like to address it? Although maybe Dr. Changda and then Dr. Nora. I think everyone I would like to hear what everyone has got to say.
Yep.
Okay,
thank you, Zarina. I'll endeavor to answer your question briefly and then move on to some of the comments made by Dr. Ida Nurosharini earlier. Zarina, the answer to your question who are the specific stakeholders that we need to engage in to change the medical curriculum in Malaysia? Here's a list. It starts with the Malaysian Qualifications Agency, or MQA, which was created through an Act of Parliament in 2007. Inside the MQA, there is something called a Joint Technical Committee for medical school curriculum. Inside the Joint Technical Committee, it is representatives of MQA, the Malaysian Medical Council, Malaysian Higher Education Ministry, and if I'm not mistaken, also the Public Services Department, or JPA. There could be others, but these are the main, stakeholders over there. So that's one entity, the MQA, represented inside the MQA by the Joint Technical Committee. MQA is not only for medical schools, it's for all the degree courses by all the universities in Malaysia. I think Dr. Wan will be able to provide a lot more clarity there. I'm just narrowly commenting on medical schools. Secondly, for medical schools, there is something called a Dean's Council. In Malaysia, there are 33 medical schools, 11 public, 12 private. Malaysia has more medical schools on a per capita basis than US, UK, Australia, and Canada. To repeat, Malaysia has more medical schools per capita than US, UK, Australia, and Canada. Of that 33, the deans of the 11, but not the 33, 11 public schools come together in a Dean's Council, and they talk a lot about medical students' curriculum. And that's just medical students. The curriculum for specialist training and postgraduate training is a separate matter. It's less governed, it is governed by MQA, but it's more complex because then it becomes a professional body rather than an educational body. So MOH has a lot more influence in the postgraduate training than in the undergraduate training. Zarina, these are the stakeholders we need to get to. May I respond briefly to Dr. Aida's excellent point about the lack of time in two ways. Number one, if it's a truly important role to become a hospital director or deputy director of health, for example, then you have to make time. And if you can't make time, then we'll make the time for you, as in we'll reallocate your priorities and so on and so forth, so that you'll be able to have a more holistic, say, skill set for anyone to govern a department, a hospital, a state, or even an entire division inside the Ministry of Health. So I think it's often a matter of where there's a will, there's a way. But secondly, I'm under no illusions that a doctor who wants to be or is a state health director needs to be having a PhD in political science or anthropology or sociology. No, not at all. But at least a mini module. Let me just invent a 6-day Institute of Pengurusan Kesihatan. And in that 6-day program, half a day, 3 hours, 4 hours on sociology, 3-4 hours on anthropology, 3-4 hours on law and the legal determinants of health. That's plenty. And if you're interested, go take another master's, or if you're really interested, go take a PhD. The concept is that we have this modular approach over a 60-year career. So let's just say you graduate at 25 years old, or we graduate at 25 years old. It's possible that we will work until 75. We will live till 100, we'll work till 75. That's a 50-year career. I think just relying on 5 years of medical education before we start our career will probably be inadequate, and we have to constantly, on a modular approach, in small bite-sized doses, improve ourselves with the humanities and social sciences. Thank you, Zarina. Over to you.
Thank you. Amazing as usual. Anyone else? Dr. Chang?
Maybe let me just follow on from what Dr. Khor has mentioned. I think when we talk about including this into the medical curriculum, I think we need to have a very clear understanding what is the objective of this. The intention is not to make doctors to be experts in economics, in anthropology and so on and so forth. Perhaps the approach that what I personally have done with the medical program in the UK University is that these are modules, small modules. For example, on communication, they will just spend half an hour to 1 hour a week, or maybe one afternoon, 3 series of different communication modules that they will come. And so they will come after lunch at 2 o'clock. The first half an hour will be in cultural communication. The second half an hour, they will go into another forms of communication. So these are mini modules, and they are not a subject. It's not like asking someone to incorporate the entire corpus of economics, like what I did as a degree in 3 years, that we expect the medical students to be doing that. Because that model, that if you're thinking about that is the American model. Because the American model, you go and do your first degree in a general degree. It could be a liberal arts degree, and then you come back and spend the next 4 years specializing in medicine to become a doctor. We are not in that kind of environment. Our university structure is not meant for that. So ours is very much the more British way of doing it. But I think we also need to be innovative in terms of thinking about the curriculum. Not everything in the curriculum needs to be accessed in a formal way through examination. And I agree with what Dr. Aida has mentioned earlier. The pandemic is a silver lining. in many ways, right? It has, for the very first time, forced us that we cannot have an examination hall where we get all the students to sit there, and for 3 hours they sit in front with a paper and pen, and then they have to answer final exam questions. I think we are still in, this was a method of examination maybe 100 years ago. It was already like this, and we have not evolved. But the pandemic has forced us that this is not possible. But what has the university comes about in terms of improving for that? Now we introduce what we call the proctor examination, asking using AI to force the student to sit in front of the computer and then still use paper and pen for examination. Why are we not moving away from that to really think what is the most effective way to assess the students? Because an examination is ultimately just a test of memorization and knowledge. A lot of other things cannot be tested through examination. Medical education for the last perhaps decade has been more innovative in the sense, because I personally have come across colleagues when I was doing my PhD that looks at different ways of medical students was being accessed. They were doing PhD in both the medical school and also in the School of Education where I'm based. So I know there are more innovative approaches to assessment in medical education, but are we really pushing that into the mainstream curriculum, right? And for example, bringing in all these little modules of social science and humanities program, we don't expect an examination for them at the end of this, because it's just defeat the purpose. But in fact, the whole purpose and objective is to give awareness and to give a basic understanding that there is this body of knowledge out there that as a doctor, you need to at least have some basic understanding. Not to be the expert on economics, not to be expert in political science, but you need to grapple with some of the basic concepts, and that's the whole intention. And I think the curriculum needs to balance between what is, we cannot take a very structureless, rigid approach to think about the curriculum, but we need to be more innovative to see how we can balance between the essentials and the other parts, and to rethink again some of the assessment methods underlying that. And not examination is not the best way to assess our students for most of the courses, in fact, in the university.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Dr. Chang. Yes, Dr. Nora, I was just going to ask you whether you can using IUM as a model, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Zarina. Actually, I think in UIA, maybe a part of the other universities as well. The curriculum is made in such a way that, because our niche in UIA is the integration and Islamization of human knowledge. The name itself also shows that. But we don't want just for the Muslim community, but the model should be able to be used internationally. So I guess the first question, who are the stakeholders? I agree with Dr. Khor, and even I'm previously last year I was the chairman for the National Conjoint Committee for Psychiatric Postgraduate Training in Malaysia. And I'm also writing group for the new curriculum for National Postgraduate Psychiatry training in Malaysia. So which is just launched, and we try to look at rather than the assessment system. It's not just at the end of the exam. We can't assess a student just by one single examination. So this is where the assessment for learning take over the assessment of learning. So this to translate and what sort of specialists, what sort of doctors that is going to serve your communities. For in UIA, I can see that apart from the usual core subject, we have the parenting school, the co-curricular, which is embedded, and as well as the student need to sit for that. I mean, to take, and it is part of the credit hours that they need to in the beginning. And there's also the project based, more on the community. This is one thing about the medical student, to equip them, so to equip them with the skills, the managerial, and also another thing that they have a IIUM medical practice, Islam, which is also a credit hours by itself. And I think most of the universities in Malaysia, because of the Ministry of Higher Education, not force, so-called force us to teach on the entrepreneur as well. So I guess it's very good for the students to develop all these leadership skills and how to do some simple project to get some. And on top of that, I am very happy because what the university do is to equip us as a teacher, as a trainer. So I went for the I was a few other lecturers as well. I am the trained for the digital entrepreneurship. Then these are the things that I give, because I'm in the medical education, and currently I'm the advisor for medical education unit for Kulliyyah of Medicine. So that's why so we put it in such a way that they have the credit hours, they need to do it, and for sure most of the leadership skill, the activities, the community involvement is part of their learning, and this is assessed in terms of for learning rather than of the learning itself. So this is the UIA experience, and how to make the teachers more how to make the teachers or educators ready and more it's not easy, as Dr. Aida mentioned just now, because we are clinician, this and that. However, if the university are so serious about producing the undergraduate, so they should be identified. Who are these people? We offer you, if they are going to be the deans of medical faculty, the management should identify. On top of that, maybe there are also person who wanted to be there. I mean, they probably they are the born leader. So either the university identify from the beginning and send them for the courses or whatever they need to equip as the leader. And then the other things that I would like to add on is how to bring the students more, the curriculum more appetitive. Is perhaps we have to have personalized education. When we see the patient, we always say that this medication, this sort of a treatment, personalized to you, is suit your needs. But we could also have personalized education. I mean, we have a student, maybe the standard deviation, not much. You will have the good student, very good. They are diamond, need to be shine, but there are also some pebbles need to be smooth. So some can graduate fast, and they can some can graduate later, as long as they are given at their own pace. So this is where they can exercise what are the skills that they can do, apart from just busy with the medical knowledge, reading and this, but they can also have more time with the other subjects, like a modular that Dr. Chandra mentioned just now. And I can see that, because I'm not the UIA graduate, undergraduate. I was from UKM. We are quite traditional last time, but now I can see there's lots of integration just to cater the needs of producing the balanced graduate in terms of postgrad or undergrad. That's one thing in what I learned in UIA. I am very pleased when one of the students said, "Doctor, I have parenting class today." Oh, okay. And and they even appoint me as a what do you call it, trainer or facilitator for the parenting class. I mean, this is this sort of the UIA curriculum itself is there, but it's just the exercising and the readiness of the teachers. I remember when we joined UIA, they said perhaps we have to go for Islamic reveal knowledge, the study, the Islamic study. You can do it as a diploma or that. And being an academician, I think I am educator, I'm a teacher. I like what I'm doing now. So I entered the Islamic study. I attended the digital entrepreneurship, all this just to equip myself. And Alhamdulillah, what I found is much more appealing, and to me is everything now can be done online. The technology bring us with borderless education. So you just need to learn, and you get all these courses online. So that's how probably can cater the no time in the as a teacher. That's all.
Thank you, Dr. Nora. Sadly, Dr. Khor has to leave promptly at 12 o'clock. Can I just ask Maisara can we have a group photo, at least of the panelists, of everyone, if possible, before?
Yes, okay.
Thank you, Maisara. Just do your magic, okay? Whatever you need to do. And
all
don't
right.
forget.
Okay,
Anyone can
so
open the video actually. If Professor Aziz, I don't know
yeah.
whether you're there, Professor Kamal Hassan, Ahlan wa sahlan, and yeah. All right.
So if everyone is ready, put your best smile on my count. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Karima Hanim just Professor Kamal. One more time, please. Professor Kamal, our deputy rector. He was also my teacher of many years.
Okay, great.
Must be. So everybody can switch on the videos if you like. And Haliza, Noraida, Rafita, Professor Aziz. Really nice. Thank you for joining us. You must ask us a burning question right after this. Count.
Okay. On my count. 1, 2, 3. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maisara. Okay. Is there any other questions from the floor? If not, we're gonna wrap up. Dr. Hayati, I don't know whether you wanted to respond to the upshot of it. Professor Murad, was when you stepped up for a while. Dr. Aida, who was who's a doctor by training and also a lecturer, she was saying that there's not enough time to be the administrator, to suddenly be HOD, to also teach. You've got your clinical work. It's just, and then Dr. Khor was responding. He said, you'll make time. If you don't make time, then ideally whoever hired you. But that sounds very perfect in theory, right? But I've been through I've been through the mill myself, and sometimes you don't have that time. They don't make time for you, so you end up cutting time with your family. You go back home later. You end up taking away things which was good for your own mental health to put it back to to plunge back to work, because more often than not, whoever gave you that job, extra admin job, does not make sure that you've got enough time. Sorry, but this is how this is the kind of feedback I've received. So, Dr. Hayati, what do we do in times like this, really?
Okay, I think with the pandemic, I think it teaches us a lot. Okay, we as trainers, we are the supervisors, consultants, we are worried that our young doctors don't have enough skills because they are doing everything online. They don't know how to palpate. I think we have to move with the world. We cannot use our own medical skills, medical school teaching to work with the young people now. You see, for example, during my days, we shouldn't be using those kind of words usually now. Let's say, when we, in the 90s, when we don't have a lot of technology, Okay, we don't have AI to help us. You know, we use our basic skills. So we have to, you see, to learn a hard sound, it takes days and months to be expert in that hard sound. That is where we've spent our time in the 90s. But now with the advances of the echo, the cardiogram, all that, they don't have to listen actually. Okay, so I think we trainers, we curriculum makers and all that, we should look into the advances into the AI, because those days we have to really listen to our ears to auscultate a lung. But now we have MRI, we have CT scan, and even with the COVID now, those days only we will know patients are hypoxic or not. Now during COVID-19, people can buy their own pulse oximeter. They know how to analyze their own pulse oximeter. With the AI, with the new technology, I think we should approach medicine in a totally different way. Not the traditional way. I know people were so passionate about the traditional, it's about this in an art, is a skill. But in the next era, the art and skill is a different art and different skill. So I think it's very important for us to change our mindset that we have to move. We have to be able, like Zarina said earlier, to see the future. Because now even maybe they can just do consultation through the phone. They don't even have to touch the patient now. Because with the AI on all the analysis that the AI can do, so sometimes we don't even have to see our patient, because the patient are not as, the patient now are very smart, and with the gadget, they can monitor their own self. Even now they're monitoring the blood glucose at home. You don't have to do it anymore. They know how to prick themselves with the new gadget. So I think we have to look forward, like Zarina said earlier, so that we can save more time to do some other things. And like Prof Murad was saying that we have to get the hemotherapy and the art component. I think I would suggest that it's not an exclusive lecture and all that, but we should incorporate these skills into the medical teaching. So like, let's say you want to study about, especially when I'm giving example of psychiatry, just take a movie and analyze the movie. Or even the movie is not good enough, but we can discuss on what is not good about the movie. To me, good and bad, there are opportunities to criticize, to comment, to learn from something. So I think it's, we have to move the way, we have to shift the way we think and on how to do medicine. Even looking at child and adolescent psychiatry, Malaysia is so used to sit on the table and talk to your patient. But with my children now, I work with them, they can talk to me better, because the children now, they have problem with the eye contact. So when we walk together on the street, at the park, talking to them, they are more open to us. Even Hospital Bahagia, we have a lot of rambutan trees. Just plucking the rambutan trees with a child, you can see a lot of things there. But if you sit in the room with them, nothing will come out. They will just shake their shoulders and they will never tell you anything. Because you see, the young people now, they have very difficult to have an eye-to-eye contact, because they are brought up not with an eye contact, with a screen contact. So I think we should adapt to it. We cannot run away. We cannot blame the social media. It's coming. Okay, I think this is something that we have to highlight. Even me, myself, even I'm retiree, but I still have to learn a lot to keep up with the kids and how they are thinking. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yati. That was really interesting. And Professor Murad was just writing in the chat function. He added media film. And
can I add?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, Dr. Norhayati and many others, you've come up with wonderful streams of thoughts on this. Well, you see, when doctors, when people watch films, when we do film studies, for example, when we see films, there are many ways to look at it. But when we see films as a within a certain perspective, then that film can educate us in our profession. My point here is this, that we are not going to create polymers from physicians. That's a false idea. But we're going to create enlightened physicians who would be able to interact with the human condition. And this is where I think we need, again, technology is mentioned. But I'll go one step further in looking at technology, not as something outside of us, but within us. We are the technology. When you talk about AI, we are the technology. And doctors must realize that human beings are the technology, because the technology cannot work without us. The oximeter will be meaningless if we don't see ourselves as part of it. We are integral to it. It is embedded in us. So this is where I think it's important for physicians who are trained in how we conceptualize the domain or the dimension of technology. Another point, perhaps my final point here, is that earlier on the professions, law, medicine, they were created, and the recruitment of those into the profession is controlled. It's not knowledge private to everybody. It is controlled knowledge. It is knowledge that is only private to those who are trained, educated, accredited, licensed to apply the profession, to be a physician or to be a practitioner. And that's why we have regulatory bodies. Part of the function of the Malaysian Medical Council or Medical Council is to regulate. I use the word control, to control and regulate those who are recruited into the profession. So perhaps the better word is regulation. So again, but what has happened over the last 200 years has changed with the advent of technology, with the advent of different modes of knowing. Knowledge of medicine is not exclusive to the physician. In other words, knowledge of medicine is also available to anybody who wants to learn. I mean, of course, one cannot be a quick or whatever, but in other words, one can practice without a license, without having an accredited, recognized degree. So this is where I think the profession needs to take into account that knowledge of medicine is not the purview of the practitioner anymore. And this is where physicians would have to know different modes of knowing, and that their patients would be able to, as mentioned by one of us or a few of us, would have similar, would know knowledge on the similar page as us. So we have to catch up, and that's where we should know how to catch up, and we should know how to be better in terms of that, not perhaps in terms of the substantive part, but perhaps in terms of methodological part. So again, it's not a controlled form of knowledge anymore. It is now democratized and some semblance of unregulated. Thank you.
Thank you for that important, addition to everything that was discussed from morning. I think we covered this topic quite extensively, from finding out who are the stakeholders that should be brought to the table, and Dr. Khor had a lot to say. I mean, very detailed response, like MQA, and within MQA there's a technical committee. Who's in the technical committee? Basically, who are the hands that actually who are actually shaping the curriculum? So is it fair for me to say, and I think I'll probably end with this point, that currently we don't have enough non-doctors sitting at the table that has a hand in shaping the medical curriculum right now, Dr. Chanda, Dr. Yati, is that what I'm understanding? That is coming from MOH Kementerian, and it's coming from the deans of certain schools.
What is that, Zarina?
That the stakeholders that are involved closely in shaping the curriculum, that they are mainly doctors and deans of schools. We don't have other types of individuals from different trainings sitting at the same table.
Actually, our main stakeholder is the students. So students are called to formulate the curriculum as well.
Okay, for IIUM's case, you mean?
So far when we involved, actually we call the professional, as usual, stakeholders. We get the input from Ministry of Health and our main stakeholder, but the student also, through the alumni, through the student representative, they were called to be part of the formulation of when we review our curriculum.
I see.
I think, yeah, we're talking about stakeholder. I think there has to be, now we open, I think this is a good thing that is happening. The medical school and MQA must open the discussions on the curriculum to those from other disciplines. We're not talking about only students and others, no, but I'm talking about other disciplines. I mean, calling professors in philosophy, professors in literature, history, sociology, to be in the panel, to be on the MQA panel. I don't know about MQA, I think MQA is, MMC is exclusive to medical practitioners. But MQA, they can call others and they have to be open. I think now they have to be open in terms of getting other disciplines to be involved and to give inputs. And this is where we enrich the capability of students. So I consider myself a stakeholder here.
Yeah. Parents,
they have to call Prof. Mabaka. They have to call those from the history department. But this has not been done. I hope that this webinar opens up the paradigm. It has broken the paradigm to some extent, I suppose. But I hope this continues for other disciplines as well.
So principally speaking, it's the I always have a problem with it, transdisciplinary approach. You want different expertise so that we avoid this narrow sort of approach to anything. Dr. Yati, Dr. Yati always talks about principles. I mean, I remember us talking about the same subject in other topics, in other forums also. We don't want tunnel vision. We don't want tunnel vision. And the fact that I'm hearing from everybody today that there's been so much focus on science subjects and there is not enough of other disciplines. There's no appreciation of other specialities in the medical school. It shows that this is the reality and it has been so maybe the past 1-2 decades. Dr. Yati, you think? Is it something new?
I think it's not something new, but how we appreciate it. Because I give you a very simple example. When we do training for my specialists, when we will talk about forensic psychiatry, we bring lawyers in. But that's not formality. It's in a course, workshop. We bring lawyers in. We bring other parties in. We bring SOCSO in. We bring sociologists in. But not as a formal, maybe at a higher level, we will be able to do. But we have to be clear that with undergraduate students, we are focusing maybe more on the clinical skill and a bit of it. But once they are becoming a specialist, then we will have them be exposed to, the other discipline. Because we work very well with the lawyers, with the police and administrators, with, even when we want to do our mental health act, we work closely with the lawyers. We do it on our own because it's not within our capacity. It's not our expertise. So I think when you need it, then it's very important. When we talk about communication skill, then we can bring in sociologists in for a lecture of an hour or so within that curriculum. But I wouldn't go into a proper point to get a point to have that. I think the medical should absorb all these skills into the curriculum. Because you see, let's say as I'm a child psychiatrist, the school always call me to talk about mental health with the children, with the parents about parenting skill, but it's not in the curriculum. But we can always call in the experts to come in, but not to dictate what are the curriculum. Because going to schools, going to institutions and all that, I can see as a psychiatrist, approach at primary school is different. Approach when I give talk to secondary school will be different. When I approach to the university student, the college student, it will be different because their needs are different. So I would reckon that, when we want to merge all the arts, social issues, social humanitarian topics, we should incorporate not as in silo kind of thing that is a course on it. I think we should blend it together. Then it will be very beautiful.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, I think we'll need to wrap up now. It's really 12:18. I think my last question really is, if we had the Minister of Health, hypothetically, we'll find a way to communicate this message to him. If the Minister of Health was part of this webinar, I'm going to give you each 1 minute. What would you tell him? Starting from Changda. Dr. Changda, sorry, my informality.
Oh, that's a tough one. I think what I would say to him, and as well as my concluding thought, is that the pandemic has been a problem, a wicked problem, as one of recently one of a professor talks about this. But it's equally important as an opportunity for us to rethink many things, and we should not see this as a problem, but to see this as an opportunity for us to restructure and rethink what needs to go for the future. A lot of our assumptions that things that cannot be changed, cannot be that are the non-changing aspect is not really sometimes as important as it should be. And one of them is the curriculum and how we look at the curriculum, right? It's not that program or that structure that has been set in stone and cannot be changed. And I think I really like that analogy. I think, was it Yati or somebody talked about changes in the curriculum as changes in the iPhone, right? Every version of the iPhone will have common features that you won't run with, right? You will not have an iPhone that you cannot make a phone call, for example, right? Those are essential function of what the iPhone is. But at the same time, iPhone is so versatile. You can turn it into a gaming device. You can also turn it into a work device, or you can just remain using it as just a phone per se, right? And that different function should the curriculum essentially is the same like the iPhone, in that what is the essential, you won't change it, but it also leaves a lot of room for whoever the learner is to tailor for him or herself how this education process on this curriculum can develop the person and prepare the person to become a doctor. And I think to add on to that is what Dr. Khor has mentioned, is that we also need to start thinking beyond just that 5 years of medical school, but to look at medical education as a form of lifelong education. And I think it requires everyone to come together, not only the medical professions, but because the society as a large is a stakeholder to this, and the input from the society, from the university community, for example, needs to be brought to the table to have a bit of insights in terms of what this iPhone version needs to be and how it is. But we are not compromising the essentials, but to think for what are the additional features that is required as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof. Murad?
I think in the capacity as the Minister of Health, I'd like to say only one thing, that he should take this opportunity to open up the dialogue about medicine for the public at all levels. In other words, I was thinking early on, one is at the epistemological level, because medicine is not a fixed, well-defined discipline. It has never been. There are many fuzzy areas, especially over the last many decades. When we talk about the legal dimension, now we talk about the technical dimension, we talk about the cultural dimension. It has there are fuzzy areas that where everybody can be part of it. So at the epistemological level, of course, this would need the cooperation of the medical academics and scholars. Second is the dialogue at the the popular and popular level, where people can express themselves with what they would want the health systems to be, and third, at the policy level, with regard to how we can move forward, because the pandemic has created a new civilization, and we cannot see the function of the hospital, the function of the doctors in the mode of the old civilization, the old order. So we are moving into a new order, and therefore we need to recalibrate ourselves in terms of skills and knowledge. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any Dr. Nora? You have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. This is a conclusion, eh?
Yes, a conclusion for the Minister of Health.
Yeah. Yeah, my Dr. Yati is in the National Specialist Registry, so she's in the KKM, and I am last year just as a chairman for the postgraduate psychiatric training in Malaysia, in the conjoint board committee. So I think as far as concerned, KKM, our large stakeholder, is still work together with us, and we need to keep on having the discussion what sort of and through the research and the assessment needs for the community. So what sort of the needs for the stakeholders in we want our doctors actually to cater the needs of the community, and through these agencies like KKM, we also can do our market survey, look at the needs, and we can give this to the KKM. If let's say the KKM, or work together with KKM to look at the needs of the current the current needs in the public health system in Malaysia. Having said that, I just want to conclude here that pandemic is actually, apart from apart from giving us some sort of like difficulties, but also we venture in some other thing that we realize that we need to have this technology in order to equip together with the hybrid kind of thing. Because of after pandemic, we learned that it is a public health, not just the hospital, but the system, the public health system. So what do we learn is actually we have to impart this public health knowledge to our students in order to equip if, let's say, something is happening again. And what does that pandemic teach us is how our students also can involve in the community. They were called for as a volunteers in PPV. So this is one way of looking at how the learning to make them human as well. They are in the community. And what the thing that I learned, one thing is the education, we cannot work in silo. And if let's say we work together, we share the same resources. So the future medical education should be able to work together, integrating from each level in the 5 years, and also the curriculum that we have for undergraduate is preparing for them for the lifelong learning actually. So I was in the undergraduates and we go for the postgraduate. Actually, it is together. It is there. It is now. It's there. It's just maybe the result we do not look at in it, but it's there. It's there in our PEO, program objective. So we can see that we prepare our student now to be able to for lifelong learning when they are entering the specialization, because I'm glad that I have both in the undergrad and as well as postgrad. And what the pandemic tells me that we should share resources among universities, among internationally as well. I mean, it will be cost saving, and it is much more focused. So let's say I have in most of the postgraduate training in Malaysia, we actually share the resources. The KKM and the lecturer, the KKM specialist is our trainer. The lecturer is also a trainer. So, and then we have, we share the resources. We put sometimes centralized examination. So, and then we should share even the videos, whatever the teaching materials. So this is should be one our way forward in the future studies for the medical, for medical education. I think that's what we get from pandemic, the silver line, like Dr. Aida mentioned just now. And then one last point that I probably want to conclude is the medical education now is not just discovering mystery through the learning process, but it must be a clear. The students are given the learning objective, learning outcome, the destination, and to go to this destination, they must be they can be guided to that. So let's say we have so what they said is the journey is mapped for them. They can see transparently that this is the destination, the objective, but how do you go to that? This is through the learning process. They can see that such as a learning opportunity, how to get to their destination. So perhaps we in principle, the future medical education must more dynamic. I guess it's not just static for this medical knowledge. It must be more personalized to sometimes. Some students who are very brilliant, they get all this, maybe they can graduate in shorter time. But for those who require longer time, they can graduate a little bit longer, but still within the core, the time frame and the core principle is like iPhone is still iPhone. So they are still doctors. So thank you, I think, Dr. Zarina.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nora. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Yati, no one has stuck to the 1 minute. I've given everybody 1 minute.
Okay, I will start to the 1 minute. No worries. Okay,
Thank
because
you.
Talking to the minister, you have to be very short and sweet. Okay, dear Minister, I think health is everybody's business. Health is everybody's business. All ministry need to work together in planning for the future of Malaysians' health. But let KKM execute the service. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you one question. Have you add one thing? I always worry about this. When we change prime ministers, what happens to KKM? Do they suffer? Does leadership change? This is an honest question.
You see, because maybe KKM, we are professional bodies. So sometimes how PM change and all that, because medical is still our forte. I think they still have to get our advice on that. Unless
That's
the Prime
great.
Minister is a doctor. Okay.
Okay. So that means KKM is quite safe in that way. And when I say safe, I mean that assuming that there are some good policies going on, there's some maneuvering, you know what I'm trying to say? It's like, if let's say after this dialogue, we are trying to, like Professor Murad says, right? We need to open up this dialogue. And say by some ways we managed to contact the Minister of Health, and he's like, okay, I'm going to have a public dialogue on health. So we start putting things in, all this effort. We don't want it to just go to mush because someone changes the head. Because I know it happens for the newspaper, for instance. A new prime minister comes, and somehow the editor, some local newspaper gets changed, or some vice chancellor gets changed. I hear that a lot. I've seen that happening. But it's good to know that Kementerian Kesihatan is somewhat different. It's a different animal. So, you know, you're almost like the untouchable a bit, not in a bad way. So that gives you that leeway.
Yeah, but I reckon because I think our Prime Minister is presenting the next Malaysian plan. I think there is where, you know, in KKM we have that plans, we follow that plan. So there is, I think if a minister were to call for a public talk, go for the principles. Somebody has to monitor. It's about principles, not the integrity part of health issues.
The nitty-gritty, it becomes a complete waste of time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, let's just plan. We hope with the next dialogue would be with the Minister of Health. I can dream, right? And maybe some of my dream may come true. Well, I'd like to thank every single one of you, mainly Professor Murad. Really, I was just the executor. He had introduced me to all the brilliant panelists. I thank Dr. Nora, and I was introduced to her by, you know, one of the deputy rectors of IIUM, and she introduced me to Dr. Norhayati. I think it's beautiful how a network of people are brought together in a forum or webinar to share knowledge, to share insight, to share values in the name of improving humanity, improving lives of Malaysians and our community. I will stop here. And Professor Murad, would you like to have the last word?
I would like to thank especially Zarina and the panel members. I think we have opened up public discussion on the medicine, generally regarded as a very private, controlled form of knowledge. We have to open up. It's important that we open up knowledge about medicine and medical practices. Not that we want everybody to be a doctor, but because we have to be engaged with intelligence and the facility with technology that the physician must take into account. So this would be a continuing or should be or can be a continuing dialogue, not only on medical education, but on other forms of education in the university, where we invite people to discuss about the curriculum, discuss about the formation of the individual human being as a graduate of a university from any discipline, and to look into how things can move and change and transform. I hope this continues. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. And I'd also like to thank Ili, Maisara and Ili, who have helped me, and Puan Rafida, who's helped us with the link, and all our kind participants that are here today. Once we have the recording, we will definitely be sharing it with all the panelists. Take care and have a great weekend. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Take care. Bye. Bye, Dr. Nora, and bye, Dr. Norhayati.